Welcome to episode 152 of The Route, a glorified coffee chat that is a new guest every episode and it takes you from A to B with our guests. I'm your host, Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we get into today's guest, just a couple things to cover as always. First, if you haven't already, take the time to follow, subscribe, do whatever you need to do on podcasting platforms. We're on all the traditional audio ones. I think it's about 9 to 10 at the moment. That's Spotify, Google, Apple, Amazon as well, and a few others. And that's all at the Route Podcast there. And then if you're watching us on video, you can follow us on the YouTube channel. So that's actually at the Routecast on all platforms where we have audio and video, and that comes out every week. And then kind of building on that too, if you want to find out, who our guest is when the episodes are coming out, you can follow us on social media. That's also at the Routecast. You can see at the top hand corner here, it says at the Routecast. And just take the time to subscribe, follow. You can find different clips and the different, let's say, magazine covers that comes out with each episode. So take the time, do all those. It helps the podcast grow a little bit easier, and it's always much appreciated. But with that now all covered, we can get into today's guest. Today's guest is brought to you by Zoom. In the world of partnerships, there's a simple principle. You adapt or you die. In this fast-paced industry, you can't afford to miss a beat. And that's where Zoom will help you win each and every time. Zoom provides premier real-time data insights for partnerships across broadcast, streaming, and social like no one else. They're always ready, and detailed analytics help you get the upper hand and save time in your day-to-day reporting. So if you're ready to upgrade your reporting today, make the smart choice and choose Zoom. With that, today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who has dabbled in founding not one, not two, but three businesses, whilst also working their way up the marketing ladder through various industries such as consulting, recruitment, and others. I'd now like to welcome the CEO of Meerkat Marketing, Kyle Turk. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess as the podcast name states, The Route, do you mind maybe taking us through yours? Where to begin and how to get to where we are today?
Yeah, I think my career in marketing started back when I was in university. I went to St. FX. Shout out to the X Ring. There it is. So I took a little business when I went to St. FX and then ended up majoring in marketing. I chose marketing, I think, just being a bit of a slacker at school. It seemed to be the easiest. Might have been because I had a knack for it. It might have been just because I found it. Maybe they just weren't as difficult as the finance and accounting side of business. So that's how I kind of found my way into marketing. Just majored in it. From there, being at St. FX, I was in the East Coast. So Halifax was kind of the big to work in. I loved Halifax from when I went to visit. Had great times there. My brother was living there at the time, so Halifax was definitely where I wanted up. Unfortunately, I didn't really have any marketing experience other than my being at school, and find a job in marketing when to live in Halifax. So I was going to either head back home to Peterborough, Ontario, where I was from, or figure out a way to live in Halifax. So that's why I ended up kind of starting my own business right out of school in 2007. Maybe very old there, but yeah. So I ended up. I mentioned my brother lived there too. So I ended up. My brother was working at a graphic design uh, in Halifax there, and I was able to convince him to leave his job that he had just gotten out of university, because we were part of a double cohort. So we actually graduated school together. We're only a year apart. So we went through school the same years, graduated at the same time. So he was able to find a job. He was a very talented graphic flash design for those back in the day, kind of skill set. So he was able to get a job. I unfortunately wasn't, but he was able to leave and start a business with me. So we co-founded Faces Magazine, which was our first business. It was a kind of a nightlife publication where we went out to bars, different music, kind of concerts, that sort of thing, and just took pictures of basically a printed Facebook. So it kind of came out the exact same time as Facebook opened up to the general public. Previous to that, when I was in university, you had to have a university email address to sign up for Facebook. So we were one of the early adopters on Facebook, very helpful as we kind of moved through into the marketing realm, especially as social media started taking off. But yeah, so we started Faces Magazine. We were basically just going to bars, taking pictures of people, putting it in the magazine, selling advertising, and then kind of getting people to actually pick up the magazine and read it so you could sell more ads. So that was kind of our first business. Along with Faces came a demand for my brother was very skilled in Flash kind of web design. And Flash was really big back in '07 to about 2010. So we started a marketing back in the day called Side B Creative Bureau, which we launched in '07 as well, along with the magazine. And we were predominantly just creating kind of advertisements, flash websites for clients in Halifax. And we were really kind of humming along. We were basically the go-to shop for anybody who needed flash work in Halifax. A lot of the big agencies were using us and subcontracting us out. So we're getting tons of work. Unfortunately, in 2000, 3 years as we were gaining momentum, the iPhone came out and didn't support Flash web design. So in a matter of instance, nobody wanted Flash work anymore, and that was kind of the end of our kind of niche that we had there. So we decided when the iPhone came out that we would just kind of stop the Side B Creative Bureau side of things, our agency, and just focus solely on Faces Magazine, which was going really well. So from there, we grew Faces in Halifax. It started to operate and kind of run itself. So the two of us kind of didn't need both of us there anymore. So our kind of expansion plans were to grow by different locations. The magazine was very local. As I said, we'd go to bars and concerts, that kind of thing, take pictures of people. So I ended up moving to Ottawa, Ontario, and opening up the second location for Faces Magazine. Um, from there, I ended up kind of growth by franchise, and we were up to 6 franchises at one point at kind of the peak, I would say, and then a couple of them kind of slowly just kind of shut down. They weren't performing as well as the others, and when you're in a franchise world, you have to disclose how all the franchises are doing. So it kind of put a really damper on our ability to be able to sell franchises with a couple kind of not working out well. So we ended up just selling the business because we felt our growth model that we had currently just wasn't going to be what we hoped it was going to be. So we sold Halifax location separately, Ottawa location separately, and kind of moved on from being entrepreneurs, we'll say. And then, so I took my, after, stopping Faces, I was in Ottawa. Everybody said, you got to get a job. So I went to Canada Post as my first kind of job, and that was in 2015. So 8 years after, being an honor and the only thing I knew. Loved Canada Post, great people there, but I ended up getting recruited to Welch LLP to help run the marketing department there, which is an accounting firm in Ottawa. And that's kind of where I attribute a lot of my knowledge, a lot of process structure, and really understanding the full marketing realm. I attribute to being at Welch. Had a couple really great mentors there. The manager Michael Birch, another good friend and partner there, Garth Steele at the time, and they really kind of helped kind of propel my career, I would say, to kind of really top the kind of marketing scene as well as I could. So got a good start there. Going to Keynote Search after Welch, after a few years there. There, I ran the marketing department as well, and for an executive search firm. Loved it there, had a great time. Ended up going to Altus Recruitment after that for a short while, before going full time as an entrepreneur into Meerkat Marketing. Meerkat Marketing, I started back kind of just helping friends when they'd call, they need help, they need websites, logos, some consulting on social media, that sort of stuff. So I always kind of had it in the background. but then I decided to jump into it full time just March 2023. So it's been fantastic so far, and that's kind of I know that's a long spiel, but kind of a ramble into how I ended up at Meerkat Marketing and in marketing in general.
No, that was perfect. That was I got so many questions already lined up, so that's fantastic, and that's why I love asking that question to begin. So typically what I like to do is maybe kind of going back to the beginning, we'll work our way back to where we are now. And I guess maybe one of the biggest ones, because when I first started the podcast, I used to get a lot of messages of, hey, what school should I go to or what program? Right. So I was kind of curious. Everyone that goes to SF or Santa FX that I know, they love it. They always show the ring. How did you maybe pick it? Was it because your brother was there, or was there something else that kind of maybe um, interested you in that? I know you mentioned why you picked marketing, but I was just kind of curious more so about the school.
Yeah, Saint FX. I don't really know much about it. I'd never been to the East Coast. I chose it because it was the first one that accepted me. So that's why I was so excited that I was like, I'm going, let's go. But the reason it made kind of my list of applications was because I was playing junior A hockey in Peterborough at the time, and I loved playing junior A. It was fantastic. I wanted to play in the East Coast because I knew they had a league there as well, and a pretty well run league. So I chose St. FX because I had the Antigonish Bulldogs right in town there, a junior A team right in the small town of Antigonish. So I thought it'd be pretty convenient. I ended up actually going to play in Truro for the Truro Bearcats instead in the junior A league, but yeah, I called the Bulldogs, said I was coming to town. You know, I wanted to play. They told me to come try out. But then Truro had called me and said they heard I was coming down that way, and it sounded like a spot. The coach was fantastic, so I ended up just playing there. So I'd travel back and forth while I was at school. It was only an hour away, so it wasn't too bad. But it was nice.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess then going back to, let's say, once you finished school and started having your first real experience, I think as you were mentioning that, and I kind of alluded to it before we started recording, there's a lot of maybe things that I was looking at in your route so far that I feel like I'm at that point in my career so far. And I was initially in accounting when I went to school, and that wasn't for me, right? Like I think I'm a little more creative, but I love the strategy part of it too. And I went into marketing, but I was kind of in a similar position where I was maybe starting to end my time in school, and I was like, hey, I don't have any marketing experience. I worked at a TD place here in Ottawa, and then I worked in accounting in the government. I'm like, no one's going to get me a job in marketing afterwards. So I started creating my own assets just to kind of try it out and see how I get experience from that. Um, did you always maybe think you had an inclining for entrepreneurship, or was it just fight or flight? I need to get experience and I need to do something to kind of get my name out there.
Yeah, I don't know if I always had an inkling to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in an entrepreneurship family. My dad and mom ran their own business. It was a stone slinger company in Peterborough. So I always grew up kind of watching them and do their thing. And so it's probably, you know, what I grew up knowing. So it probably made the transition a bit easier. And it was also, you know, when I discussed it with my parents to say, listen, find a job. I think I'm going to start my own company. You know, I'm going to hopefully my brother will join, and you know, the two of us will have something going. They were very supportive of the idea. They were actually the first ones to give us a loan. So they actually gave us a loan until we were able to get real loans to pay them back. So they were very helpful as well. So we just kind of made it happen, and then you know it was either going to work or it wasn't. If it didn't work, we knew you know we could always live in mom's basement, but you know, luckily it didn't come to that.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. That makes a ton of sense. And to be honest, I think when I started my business, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm young. I'm like, I don't have a house, don't have kids, don't have, I don't know, a car, or fences, whatever to pay for. I'm like, might as well take the risk. So I can definitely understand that. Um, and I guess then going back to that, what I don't know, was it more so like with Faces Magazine? Was it something just you were experiencing Facebook and you kind of got that idea, or was it something really that you had on your own and you thought there was like a need to kind of start it?
Yeah, it was interesting. My brother did a 2 year kind of international graphic design degree as part of his kind of NASCAD. He went to the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. As part of his degree there, he did 2 years in Mexico. And he said in Mexico there was a magazine that everybody always picked up every bit, and it was pictures at weddings. So it was just pictures of everybody's wedding and people there having a great time. And it was sort of like what Face is based around. We just turned kind of that wedding kind of party into kind of the nightlife party in Halifax, because Halifax had a very strong, still does. So we just kind of changed, I guess, the where we were taking the pictures, but it was a very similar format to one seen down there. So he was actually a big driver of the actual ideation of Faces.
Yeah, that's very cool. I remember I was reading an article too once. I think there's these three brothers in Germany, and I think they tried doing something with eBay or something, and eBay didn't want to work with them, so they just started kind of creating a bunch of American businesses, and they sold them for hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Where they're essentially just taking successful businesses in other countries and recreating them in Europe. But no, that sounds fantastic, and I'm kind of curious more so about starting the business with your brother. I know when I first started my business, like, oh, this is the idea I have. I want to kind of create and go from there. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like my baby, right? But I think looking back, one of the things that would have been great is to have a partner. So do you like maybe looking back, do you now realize maybe how advantageous it was where you guys can kind of bounce ideas off each other, have these different skill sets and kind of grow from there?
Yeah, I think it worked out really well. Brother and I kind of our skill sets complemented each other very well. So he was very artistic, very creative. So at the time, I mean, he was doing all the magazine load. He did all the photos when we started. He did all the flash web work on the agency side, and it was my kind of role to market the magazine so that try to make it popular. So we had $0 budget, so I was utilizing Facebook primarily as a way to drive kind of interest in the magazine, and then it was selling advertisements. But it ended up working well. As people saw themselves in it, when they'd see us out, they'd want to be in it, and then the advertising. I don't want to say it came easy, but it ended up, people wanted to advertise in the magazine because they knew target demographic were picking it up and looking for it and getting their pictures taken and being in it. So a lot of the kind of beer, liquor, and nightlife, restaurants, that sort of thing, all became big advertisers.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess on that same note, once you started getting those advertisers, let's say working with you with Faces Magazine, did that maybe then, let's say, parlay into future business for the agency that you then started, where you already had that relationship with maybe some of these, let's say, service-based businesses, and they're like, hey, like you guys are pretty creative, or you have some good ideas. Do you want to help us out in another realm? And maybe that's how it started.
Yeah, we definitely got some work from our advertisers as well. Not as much as you'd think. A lot of because a lot of them weren't into kind of the flash or the digital landscape, other than knowing there was this thing called Facebook, and somehow Josh and I had access to it. So they were
Yeah.
intrigued and interested by that. Um, but they weren't too flashy on the kind of the web or digital side. A lot of them, being in that industry, were more print focused and just kind of in person focused.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Just kind of thinking back to, let's say, the different evolutions of social media. Where I was out to dinner with my cousins the other day, and one of them's 15 years old, and I think one of my cousins and I were saying that we watch Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, and then she's like, "Oh, you guys are so ancient." She's like, "No one does that." And then just thinking back to Facebook, all those different things, I'm like, I didn't know Instagram
Yeah,
was ancient already. But no, that's very cool. Just thinking
yeah.
back that,
Well,
like,
what's she into
go ahead.
now? I said,
TikTok,
what's she
all
into?
TikTok.
Only
Yeah,
TikTok? Yeah.
only
Well,
TikTok,
Reels
and
is
then
basically the same thing. Yeah.
I know, but not to them apparently. And the craziest aspect of that too is they don't post on TikTok. I've kind of noticed from what she was saying, they just repost. So someone will make, let's say, almost like a mood board similar to Tumblr or like Pinterest, and that's what they reshare. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting that everyone's like huge on this app, but no one really uses it. Like they all just post from like these random accounts, and I was like, oh, that's so different from I remember Instagram in high school or Facebook. I'm writing about like, hey, Alex Auld, great save tonight against Montreal. So
Yeah.
kind of just
Yeah.
cool.
Think back at some of the memories. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then I guess going back to when you're doing the agency, I guess you guys had that niche, right, with Flash, as you're referring to with your brother's skill set. Um, but I know one of the things you then mentioned too, it kind of quickly or abruptly ended when the iPhone came out, and that wasn't as much in demand. Was that maybe a period that was like a few months, weeks, a year long, where it kind of slowly declined, or was it fairly abrupt? The iPhone comes out and the world changes from then on.
Yeah, it was pretty abrupt. Apple said the iPhone wasn't going to uh, support Flash, and then being the like new thing, you think about the iPhone, how popular it is. When that first comes out, everybody wants one. Everybody thought they were cool. They were all going to move to it, and then it became, uh, yeah, pretty abrupt. Where people were like, "Well, if the iPhone isn't doing, I don't want a Flash website because that's the new tech, right? That's the new thing." So it became kind of old, but I kind of miss some of the old Flash websites. There was a lot more creativity back in the day with websites. I remember there'd be people, video of people coming onto the site, for top overlaying the website, talking and walking you through things and different games, Flash games, stuff like that were incorporated into a lot of the sites. So miss the nice Flash websites.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. I had no clue what Flash was when I was younger, but I remember I needed it to play like all the different games I wanted to on the computer. But
Yeah.
I would just go on my dad's work laptop, download it quickly, and then his laptop was slower or something like that, and he was questioning what it was. But no, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess maybe kind of going back to that period, was there ever maybe a point in time your brother and yourself ever maybe thought, hey, let's pivot into servicing other areas that maybe our clients wanted, or was it really more so it happened so abruptly? You're like, hey, maybe let's just kind of go into more to the faces business and kind of just put all the eggs in that basket.
Yeah, well, I mean, the iPhone was a big player, and Flash was, I'm going to say, like 80% of our work that we were doing. But being small, being entrepreneurs, and me at the time not knowing how to do anything graphically or web based or anything, my brother was basically way overworked. He was doing everything. So he was putting the magazines together every month. He was out at night taking, he was grinding out Flash websites during the day. And he kind of just got to a point where when he heard the iPhone was, he goes, "Yeah, all right, that's it. I'm done. I need a break." So he kind of just shut her down himself too, just because. And he, into his overworked, but I just kept pushing him to keep going because as entrepreneurs, it was feeding us
Yeah.
and keeping shelter over. So I was just pushing him real hard, and I think I probably burnt him out there with all the work that we were able to bring in. So it wasn't too hard a decision. So the pivot was basically like, okay, if we're not going to do two businesses and we're going to focus on one, obviously at this point in time, it's going to be the magazine, which was running really smoothly and going really. So it kind of, the conversation just sort of switched to, okay, we won't do any of that uh, agency stuff anymore. We'll only do magazine. What's our growth model here then? How do we kind of replace the revenue from the agency with the magazine? And that's where kind of our growth model came to say, okay, let's start with a second location. Let's get it up and running, proof of concept that it works in another market, and then start franchising. And that's sort of how that conversation went.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And was that second one then the one in Ottawa, as you mentioned?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, nice. So I like I'm in Ottawa. I've been in Ottawa for a long time, and that's magazine still going today. So I'm assuming that's still the one that you then sold off, and I guess they can kind of continued operating from there.
Yeah, they rebranded as soon as they took it over, and kind of made it into more of a legit magazine. Like it's really nice now.
Yeah,
Lots of great articles, interviews, that kind of thing. When my brother and I were running them, they were I don't know if you ever seen them, but they were the green ones. They were kind of
yeah,
an
yeah.
oversized magazine, and it was literally just pictures. If we did an interview, it was most likely, a bartender or a restaurateur or something like that. So it's completely different now, but they're doing really well with it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess kind of maybe going back to that, I had someone on a couple episodes ago. I know maybe at the time of the recording, it's been a couple of months because I took the little break. But looking back at it, I had someone come on and they started a ticketing business, and they were just talking about how they were growing it, and I think something about maybe looking at getting acquired or acquiring other businesses. How did that process maybe look like? Because I think that's something very, rarely people maybe experience, right? Because whether you're working for another company or you start your own, it's not something that always happens. But how did that process look when you looked at, maybe selling off the different franchises, or like just passing it along from there to make sure it's still, let's say, successful or viable for the future owner?
Yeah, I think, like, for us, it was we already had the contacts. Both the people that acquired Halifax and the Ottawa one, were advertisers, and sort of bigger advertisers, so they knew the value, um, kind of the product. They knew somewhat of the process. So it was pretty easy, transition where, um, we were able to pass it over and kind of stay on and kind of help them kind of take it over. So they were comfortable, running the new business. So it became pretty. I don't know, it's pretty seamless, to be honest.
Oh, nice. And I guess kind of going on from there, um, following faces, I think as you mentioned, that's when you kind of went to the government realm that a lot of people are in within Ottawa. What was that um, change like, right? Because I'm sure going from, having your own business, kind of having a lot of the decision making power, at your desk, to going into the government Canada Post. What was that like, and what made you, let's say, make that jump from, one sector to the other? Because it's fairly big jumps.
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, obviously, we didn't sell for hundreds of millions of dollars for us to retire, or just mess around with. So, I ended up just, I applied to a bunch of jobs on LinkedIn. Um, Canada Post seemed, like the best option for me. I liked the role. They were great people when I interviewed there. And I think it was a big change for me, and they were hesitant, to hire me originally because they had known that I'd only been for, and it was a big change moving to such a large organization. Um, but it worked out well. It was very different. Like, uh, I don't know, there's so many more people involved in decisions. So I couldn't just do whatever I wanted anymore. Which, probably for the better, but it was good. It was good to get some experience just to see what it's like working, in a larger organization.
Yeah. And I guess with that change, was it something, I don't know if this is what your thought process was, but did you want to maybe go um to, let's say, one extreme to the other, right? Where you have all the decision making power to maybe less, so you have more of that, let's say, stability and more, you know, hey, I'll do my job and kind of move on from there? Or is it something once you actually made that change, like, hey, I don't think this is potentially for me, and that's why you kind of maybe went another lane?
No, I think it was fine for me. I think, part of the decision was right around that time. My wife and I were getting married. We would have kids. We are gonna have a family, and the lifestyle of Faces Magazine just kind of wasn't set up for that family life to some extent. Where the way we were doing it was I'd be working all day, you know, um, putting the magazine together, selling ads, getting the content put together. Then at night I'd be out at a lot of my networking was done in the bars, right? So I'd be out till 2, 3 a.m. and then I'd get up at 7 and I'd do it again, right? So it was easy to make the transition from just a point of where we were in our lives for my wife, just ready to settle down and kind of, start a family.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely get that. And I guess then going from there, I think you mentioned you were then recruited to go to Welsh, correct?
Yeah.
And I think from there, one of the things you're mentioning when you're discussing your route, that's really where you learned a lot of, let's say, some of the skill sets that you possess today. Do you mind maybe touching on that? Where obviously, I think when you start your own business, you learn a lot of things that you would have never learned unless you experienced it. But then when you go to that structured team that is a well-oiled machine, there's obviously a lot of value there too. So I just was kind of curious what that was like for you.
So Welch was fantastic because they already had a nice, they had a marketing consultant in there, Daryl Prale, who had a great setup. We're already running as a team. Things were kind of, so it was kind of like plug and play where they just kind of plugged me in, and it was okay, optimize. What else should we be doing? And kind of, learning those more formal, structured processes that the consultant and the partners that well in place. And it was a great experience too, working with kind of a partnership group where you had, you know, uh, 20 partners or so who all would help direct marketing, or they all had their own initiatives that they wanted help on. So I got a lot of experience working with different types of people on different subject matters, different industries, whether it be technology or real estate or construction. So it was really great exposure to a lot of different niches within marketing.
Yeah, and I guess once you're in that role, what was it like going on from there, right? When I think you mentioned, um, what was it, keynote came afterwards? Was there any like maybe decisions or like, hey, like this is going well, or was it something really where, hey, this is how I keep evolving my career and kind of continue going on from there and taking on a new challenge?
Yeah, it was definitely a career evolution decision. I had a really great setup. We had an unbelievable marketing team at Welch. The partners were fantastic. I loved everything about it. Had great relationships with them. But we did everything from like take Welch through their 100-year anniversary. So all the extras that came with that. It was very exciting. Had some great years with them. I moved on just because I kind of hit the plateau where I felt I wasn't going to be able to continue to grow. Um, and so I went to Keynote just to get exposure, different industry. They obviously gave me the V title, so it was definitely progression in the career as well. And I had a great relationship with the co-founders at Keynote as well, James and Donna Baker. So it was kind of an easy move from there, but it was very difficult to leave Welch because I had such a great setup there, and such great people that I was working with.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things you mentioned there I want to touch on is you're mentioning about like, plateauing, and I think that's so interesting because I think one of the things I've asked some of the guests that have come on and I've talked to different people about is when's that right time to, let's say, jump, right? And I think one of the people said, never is really the right time to jump. You just got to do it, right? And then you'll figure it out from
Yeah.
there. Um, how did you maybe start feeling like you were plateauing? Was there really just no growth opportunities? Everything was maybe becoming a little bit easier to you, and you needed, let's say something a bit different, as you were saying. And what let's say gave you that courage to make that jump over? I know you were saying it was a great opportunity, but was there ever any doubts? Because obviously, I think as you mentioned, there's a lot of going for you at Welch.
Yeah, so it was the title was big for me because it meant I went to that next stage in my career. But it was also like, I my wife and I live well beyond our means all the time. So financially, I needed a big bump as well. So I knew at some I'd have to leave just because you can't just go to your boss say, hey, can I get like a 50% salary increase, right? They look at you sideways. So I knew at some point it would have to come, and Keynote just happened to be the right kind of position for me where um, I knew well, I respected them. They had a great business that was growing, and I felt there was an opportunity to add a lot of value and impact to their business. So that kind of it all kind of laid together.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess then going on from there, you're at Keynote and then you're at Altus from there. What were those experiences like? And I know you were mentioning, I think to get to Keynote, you were recruited, but then when you maybe moved on to your different roles from there, was it always just, let's say, connections, people coming to you to recruitment? Or I know sometimes people, they come here, they'll get like a high level position. They said the only thing they did was apply on LinkedIn, which I always find interesting too. So I was kind of curious how those different roles come about and how you kinda went through them.
It was always recruiting. Like I don't know, tons of people are probably in the same position where recruiters are messaging you every week, right? Since I've started my own business, I actually don't get recruited as much. But I think when especially at Welch, I'd be getting recruitment notes all the time from people, right? Because it was a nice high profile business locally in Ottawa, and we were doing really well. The marketing was performing really well. So recruiters are always on LinkedIn reaching out, but it kind of just, I'd ignore most of them. But if one kind of popped in that I thought was interesting, I'd kind of see where that was at.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess one of the things that I kind of want to get into now as we're kind of getting to more recent times. Just looking here on LinkedIn, it said you started Meerkat in June 2020. I know you're mentioning too, kind of just started off with helping friends and let's say colleagues from there. Um, Mind me touching on that a bit, right? Because I think that was something you were saying how it's a bit more part time. You were doing it here and there. What made you decide to, let's say, get back into entrepreneurship? And did you ever think you'd go down that road again?
Yeah, I think it's just timing, right? For me to jump in, I just started looking at all the roles I was sending to other agencies in town, and how much work that there was a demand for. It only kind of made sense to jump in on my own and kind of capital on that and work for myself again. Made the risk pretty low because I knew the consistent kind of outreach that I was getting. So I knew this would be there. It was just a matter of when's the timing when you do it. And I finally just, you know, thought to myself, I may as well do it. It's kind of now or never. And it was definitely, I enjoyed being an entrepreneur. I definitely love it now. And, I've got clients now, even Keynote is one of my clients. So former employer there, which is nice. So it's, you still get kind of that excitement and getting to work with other people and driving business forward. But I enjoy working on my own.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's almost like a full circle moment where you start having your own like former bosses or former um, places of work being a client again. One of the things I wanted to ask you about there was, I guess, let's say comparing your different experiences in, let's say, entrepreneurship and starting your own business. And when you kind of compare the two, do you think really kind of going through that route of having the different experiences with, Canada Post, Welch, Keynote, Altus, do you find that really allowed you to become a better founder, business owner, entrepreneur, where you're able to kind of, I think when you were talking about Welch, you got to be exposed to a lot of different industries and a lot of different elements within marketing. Do you find maybe when you compare the two, obviously starting the first agency, you got a lot of experience, but it's stuff you would never seen unless you got that, experience in other places of work.
Yeah, I think like working at Welch, Keynote, each one of them I learned kind of different and kind of unique things that would help drive the businesses forward. You learn about works because they were all kind of professional services in terms of where I worked the last few roles. It kind of helped put me in a better niche in that kind of B2B segment of professional services, where understanding how to sell to businesses, how to market to businesses, compared to, if it was a clothing brand or a, you know, drink brand or something, it's completely different marketing than in kind of B2B realm. So I think it kind of really kind of honed my expertise a lot into that B2B. And even today, probably like 80% of my clients at B2B space, and a lot of them are professional services as well. So it kind of gave me a good specialty and something that helped differentiate kind of my expertise from a lot of other marketers in the city and around town.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I guess one of the questions I have on that note too is, um, do you found in maybe, I guess looking back, let's say comparing the two businesses from the one you started out of school and the one now, do you find when you started that first business, it almost kind of expedited your experience in entrepreneurship, but then when you went to go work at Welch and all these other companies, it almost expedited your experience in how to operate within business, right? Because you're learning from these larger corporations or even just
Yeah.
businesses on how they manage. Do you find that maybe kind of happen throughout your route?
Yeah, I'd say for sure. Especially at Keynote, like the partners at Welch and the kind of founders at Keynote were very kind of hands off in the marketing. They kind of put their trust in me, kind of run the teams, decide on what we should be doing, what we shouldn't. So it was almost like, I was running my own little team, my own little shop in that business. I just had one big business as my client, right? So those I found there was really good kind of synergy for learn from how to work within a business, but you also got to continue that sort of entrepreneurial spirit while you're there because you were decision maker, you were, having to show an impact, find what works. You were kind of thinking in a way of an entrepreneur when you were running those departments specifically. So I think it just kind of all my career kind of all played together to kind of provide me with the right types of experience to kind of be able to be an entrepreneur again and kind of understand, how businesses work, but also how to run your own business.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Almost seems like a perfect formula for you to now be successful operating
Yeah.
a business again. No, but yeah, that's fantastic. And I guess we kind of went through your route there, but before we end, I'd like to ask every guest two questions at the end just to kind of put a bow on things. So as we mentioned, we went to through your whole route to date. And the two questions I like to ask is, looking back, let's say we go to Kyle when he's about to enter St. FX. Let's say you're 16, about to decide, 18 when you first walk on campus, something like that. If you could travel back in time and have a conversation with a younger version of yourself or a current student today, what's maybe one piece of advice that you've now learned is like, hey, this is something you should write down, remember, and keep keep with you throughout your career today?
I think one piece of advice was when I was younger, and in university as well as when I first started my own business out of university, was I hated networking. I didn't want to talk to people I didn't know. I was kind of shy in the sense of like, what am I going to have to offer when I talk to somebody who's done it all, or they're way ahead of me in their careers, that kind of thing. And I think as I know now, like relationships are kind of probably the big catalyst to success, at least in terms of my industry in kind of my career path. So I think um, if I would tell myself anything, it would be network, meet new people, understand the industry a little bit more. Talk to people. If I would have done that, perhaps I would have found a job out of school, that sort of thing. So I think networking is definitely one of the keys to success, and it's kind of helped propel my careers in the later half of my career.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and that's why even sometimes when the guests say these little tidbits of advice, it even just resonates with me because I'm just thinking about it. Where throughout my career, I've tried to network, but then I find other than maybe let's say a select few connections, I'm always a bit, let's say, shy to reach out to someone again because I feel like, hey, I should only speak to them once I have this thing to share with them or some actual value that they could potentially have. But I think you're absolutely right where it's really just managing that relationship and just kind of, forming, something stronger from there. So I think that's great. Um, and the second question I have for you, just to wrap it up there, just to kind of complete it all. So we went into the past 16, 18-year-old Kyle and that great advice you shared with him. Now let's say we go to the future. I've been saying forever, 152 episodes now. I'm going to live until I'm 103. I don't know why. It's just going to happen. I'm going to be on a rocking chair thinking about all these, different good times that have happened. And the podcast is always going to help with that. But let's say you're in the same dream and be like, wow, I can't believe that, happened to me, throughout my professional career.
Ooh, geez, what's the one story, eh? There's probably so many. I think, one thing that stands out to me, it's kind of silly. Huge rap fan myself. Fat Joe is probably one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah.
So when I was at Faces, I actually had the chance to meet him and be backstage with him and spend some time with him. So that was one of the highlights of my career, I'd say, as like a music fan and a rap fan. So that was a great time. Uh, you know, that's kind of a silly one. Yeah, I love having fun. So at Welch, our 100-year anniversary year, we did AGM in Vegas, and that was a great time. Lots of great stories there. We were at the day parties, the pool parties, all that, and to get to do that with some of my good friends that I'm still friends with today from Welch. That was definitely a great time. There's probably some stories there I'll tell, not publicly. Not that they were bad, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
fantastic, and yeah, that's why I just
yeah.
like to end the podcast on a light note, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing, your great route to date so far. And unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I really want to thank you for coming on, and it's been great.
Well, that's fantastic. Oh, I just thought of one other story though. Actually, it's more career
Sure.
related, I guess. Um, so when I was at Faces, we uh, we were running the Faces Awards, and that's where people we would be favorite athlete, favorite hairdresser, favorite bartender, favorite restaurateur, favorite CEO, that sort of thing. So we had lots of categories, and the one year we had Jeff Marchand. He's a home builder in Halifax in the awards, and his brother Brad Marchand, who plays for the Bruins, had tweeted about it, and I think Tyler did as well. And we got so much traffic to our site, which we weren't expecting. It crashed the whole award system for like a few
Oh wow.
days to get it back up. So that was kind of a cool, fun thing about tidbit that we had from running our business too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's kind of crazy how those, let's say, flash in the pan moments happen you're not expecting, and then it kind of
Yeah,
causes
yeah.
that storm. But it's kind of just a cool memory to have as well, I'm sure. But no, that's great. It's been amazing having you on. A lot of cool things you've had to date, and yeah, like I've gotten a lot of value out of this. So I know a lot of people listening will as well. So thank you again, and that's it for episode 152 with Kyle Turk. Thanks so much.